you want it to be tight, then you pull that tape measure a bit tighter. If you want to dance and leap and jump around in it, then you make a big stride and you take that measurement instead. But those spaces allow you to be in the garment free, and it would flow according to your body, your needs, and how your body changes in time. That's what those spaces represent. So they can be tight and figure hugging and tailored, or they can be loose and easy to move in according to what we most want. And so all of these really have the same geometric idea. Cut a hole, and that hole joins to another hole to create a root through the material. And that's the strange thing that I'll be showing to you, is how not just one hole, but maybe multiple holes can create roots through a garment that the body travels through the fabric, and in doing so in a beautiful way. And all I'm doing is experimenting to see what that's like. And actually, most of these examples, the holes are circular, and I use a circular hole because it's nice and easy to sew. It's strong all the way round, it holds weight well. But if you wanted to, your hole might be the shape of a square, or a triangle, or an amoeba shape, or indeed anything, a love heart, a letter J, you can put words, letters. It could be that the hole that you cut is the shape of a sleeve, for example, so that when you remove the piece, rather than it being a circular piece removed from a circular hole, perhaps it could be a sleeve-shaped piece. We pulled out a sleeve-shaped hole, so that the body's passing through this hole, but also the bit that we're removing is useful in some way to maybe make a sleeve from. So, you know, you can think ahead, think about actually these holes could become useful in their shape. Anne will be called Katie Ann, because it is an accumulative effect. This user Anne here, who very kindly came to learn some craft, is going to become part of that pattern. In fact, I'm cutting it off. If you just stand here and just do a slow sort of turn, just like without getting dizzy, just do a few turns around, because this is quite interesting just to see this garment before it gets cut apart. So you've got interesting back to it. It's a little bit, you know, it's quite a long dress, this particular one. Two fabrics, one a thicker stripe, one a thinner stripe. So there's two materials it's made from. There's a few things I can perhaps tell you about if you stop just there. It will have probably some sharper corners somewhere. If I can, everyone is different, and sometimes it takes a little while to find it. There's one here, and there's one here. So there's a point here and a point there. I don't know with your hands whether you can hold this little corner. This is the corner of the whole thing. It's that little one. And on the other side, that little one. And I don't know if you can do something like this with your hands. Push backwards. That's it. And now, can you turn round slowly? That's it. So it's like a little parachute on the back. It's a little space in there, and it suggests a kind of there is an emptiness inside this garment that is bigger than Anne, and also bigger than Katie, who it's made for. There's some hollow space within there, but also it suggests a shape that is quite angular, something like a square or a rectangle, by the fact that it's got 2 points on it. Something else about this that might be said is perhaps it has some things that might potentially resemble pockets somewhere. Let's have a look if I can find one. There's one on this side. You might think, oh, that's a very useful pocket for putting, say, a wallet or a phone in. I wouldn't do that because it comes out of it. So it's like it's like a space that goes all the way through, and so it's actually only useful for an umbrella or a sword. So it's quite useful if you want to put your sword somewhere, it goes through that pocket, but not very good if you wanted to put something valuable, unless you close the end of it off. Now this seems like a hole that I put my hand through, but actually it's a loop. When you've got something flat that then joins back onto itself, it creates a loop, and that loop is like almost a little valley that you can pass through. And I'll come back to it, explaining where it is at the end. But also, by putting my hand through it, there's one here, and there's one, I think, a bit lower down here. So there's two on this garment, and both of them happen to be on the back. If I were to put your arm backwards through the lower of those two holes, then potentially, well, that's a little bit tight on you, if you just spin around, it could become a sleeve. It could become incorporated back into the garment, because that could potentially be quite interesting. So sometimes I will fix the shoulder and it becomes a built-in sleeve. That's one on that side. Perhaps I might be able to put this one through on this side if I... Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. These aren't designed to be sleeves, but they have the potential to be used as sleeves. So maybe this one goes backwards through this little valley, and it makes a different kind of sleeve. Spin around. See, I rather like this little.
That's divine. Yeah.
So there's possibilities of change. This isn't a garment that's static. It's got the ability to change it around, to do things with it. And some of that is the strangeness of its construction and the fact it's got holes that you can move through. But these aren't holes, these are loops, and there's a difference between loops and holes. As you can see, you're actually putting your hand through what I'd call a valley. Between two mountains there's a valley, and I'll show that to you later when we actually take this apart. So that's now thrown onto the back. Give me one last spin around, and then I will begin to deconstruct it. So I think I'll take one hole apart. If you step back to one down. Here, there is a seam that's curving. And that I know is a hole because I cut and constructed this. So I know that this garment is actually made from 6 holes. And you'll be seeing those 6 holes later because I'll lay them out here and I'll step inside them. But this hole here is a hole that you're not actually passing through. Your body's, Anna's body's not passing through it. If you turn now and face the audience again, there's another curved seam here on the front. And it starts on the front. If you follow the seam, it's on the front. If you continue looking at it, it goes onto the side, and then if I put my hand through, which comes out over here, it's actually going onto the back. So what's actually happening is there's a seam here that your body is stepping through. So you're actually standing inside a hole, just you don't realise it at the moment. You're actually standing inside a pair of holes, in fact, and we'll see them when I cut them apart. So turn back facing that way's good, I think. Yeah, that's great. And I'm going to cut this one apart first, just so we can understand what these holes are like. It's actually 2 holes that are connected together. And in fact, maybe I can explain it a little bit like this. The dimension around those holes are as big as Katie's waist when it was made for her. Not her waist, her hips. I'd measure her hip measurement, not a tight measurement, but an easy measurement. And she was able to fit through that. And Anna too is able to fit through that quite nicely. Now, if you were to take a rectangle, like I've got here, and fold it in half, this hole here is actually 100 centimetres big, just to keep it a nice round number, and it's been removed. There were 2 holes, and the 2 holes have been joined together. It's been folded over, and they've been sewn together with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. And what, I'll step on here so that you can actually see what's happening. So you're going to just be having a class where you're facing the wall, and that won't be very nice. If I step through this hole, and if you then move, say, this way, you see a seam here like that. That's what you're seeing here. You're seeing a seam from the outside, but actually what's happening on the inside is you're stepping through a pair of holes. When people make these garments, they put them on, and they've cut all the holes out, and they've connected them together. They often think, where's the holes gone? And it's because they're in the holes. And when you're in the hole, you can't see it. So, especially when it's a fabric that is opaque, you can't see through opaque fabric. If you make it in transparent fabric, then you get to see the inner workings very nicely. This little bit here, this is what I call the valley, the V. And that's what I was actually putting my hand through a moment ago. Or rather, Anna was putting her hand through it. And because it was big enough to put your hand through between 2 holes. If you now turn back and face towards this way, I'll cut this one apart, and we'll actually begin to see what it looks like, and I'll show you where that valley is. This garment we put back together again, because I like to take them apart and then remend them. And they then have a sort of like a second life. Because when you rip them, they create a tear, and then it's nice to hand stitch and mend them again. And that actually is a rather beautiful form of visible mending that I rather enjoy. So this hole here, this circle, was big enough for originally Katie and now Anna to step through. But in this instance, Anna isn't stepping through this particular hole. It is possible to do so, but I think it wouldn't be so comfortable on the body. So sometimes I choose for the holes to be stepped through and sometimes not. So this hole has a relationship with this hole over here that I just cut it apart from. They're equal in size and they fit it together like that. Now just cut it apart. You can begin to see, as you see inside it, that there's sort of seams on the back here that are rather interesting. We'll have a look at them next, I think. If you now face the audience, I'm going to now cut apart, I'll do this one last, but I'm going to cut apart the side seam because that allows you to look in, like X-ray vision, and see what's inside the garment. So the side seams, like this top I've got here, the side seam starts underneath the arm, but it ends at the hem. These side seams don't end up at the bottom, they instead start under the arm, they continue, and this particular one ends here. So it's not hitting the hem, it's actually going down and just ending. And I'll try and explain how that works in a moment. It's got a long one on that side, and on this side it's got a short one that starts here and continues to just this point. So they're different lengths, they're not the same length side seam. I'll open the long one first, so I don't know if you can put your arm up. I won't cover you up for this. And turn that way. You can see now inside the garment. And this side seam is like a loop that loops around here. So it's a looping side seam. And you can begin to also see that Anna is stepping inside a hole. Her body's passing through one, which continues to this bit at the front here. So I just, maybe if you give a little, or maybe we do it like this, you can begin to see inside this a bit. So I'm just going to do this very slowly round, because it looks quite interesting on video later as well. We'll speed it up backwards. Is how this video is going to be made. It still looks a very complex shape currently. And it looks complex because fabric is soft, it collapses. It's not like, say, paper or cardboard, which is rigid. It's easier for our brains to understand. When something is soft, we suddenly think, well, that's complex. Actually, it's not that complicated. When we see it flat, it's very, very simple. But our brains get a little bit confused by anything that twists, and which forms in its own kind of coiling way. So I'll let go of that one, and I'll open the other seams. So you face towards me now, and I'll open this one on this side. So both the side seams are open. This is a shorter side seam. This one ends not quite so long, but it starts under the arm and it loops back around again. It comes back to from back to front. You can now see this look at if you want to spin around too. So you see this weird, strange shape that's now forming around the body with lots of holes in it. So next up I'm going to take apart this seam here, and that's the one that Anna is stepping through. So it's both the seams on the front and on the back, because there's a hole and she's standing in that hole. So I'll release it so the two holes come apart from each other. One of them will drop lower, and hopefully it will drop low enough for you to be able to step out the side of one of them. So I'm going to do this very carefully. One of the holes has dropped quite low. If you're able to step outside of that, and it is perfect, right. So now, this hole here, that I just removed from you, a moment ago, you were stepping through and it was there. It's now over here. And now this garment is beginning to really sort of come off the body in quite an unusual way. Just going to maybe step like that for a moment. And then I'll just move around to see what the other side looks like. Had I fallen off the stage then, you would have come with me, because I was quite an unusual shape. So the next thing to do is I'm going to now cut the shoulders, and that will allow it to drop off the body, and it will allow Anna to also now step out of the garment. She will then be on the outside of it, and she can help me hold it, and you'll be my assistant suddenly, which will be switching role. I asked you to hold, a moment ago when you had your hands behind your back, you were pushing outwards, holding two corners. So these are the two corners you were holding. I wonder actually if you can swap sides. If you go where I am, and I'll come this way. That's it. So if you just go back against the wall a tiny bit, perfect. So now, you can see that this is made from two materials. One is a thick stripe, and one of them is, turn it this way up, a much thinner stripe. And it's got holes in it. Some of those holes are circular, but some of them are also more strangely shaped, and they're collapsing here, and it's slightly hard to see them because they're kind of like getting gravity as we hold it up this way. Doesn't allow us to see exactly what shape they are, but when I put it flat on the floor, we'll be able to look at it from above, and it'll be able to hold it out in a way that you'll see the full geometry. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually cut apart two of these seams so it becomes two-dimensional. And I think I'll start with this one here. Two ends that I was holding down there will be long. So now it's become two-dimensional. Okay, now what we're going to do next is we're going to walk down, maybe we'll go down those stairs, and I'll just put it on the floor here so we can see it completely flat. Will be called Katie Ann, because it is an accumulative effect. This user Ann here, who very kindly came to learn some craft, is going to become part of that pattern. In fact, I'm cutting it off. If you just stand here and just do a slow sort of turn, just like without getting dizzy, just do a few turns around, because this is quite interesting just to see this garment before it gets cut apart. So you've got interesting back to it. It's a little bit, it's quite a long dress, this particular one. Two fabrics, one a thicker stripe, one a thinner stripe. So there's two materials it's made from. There's a few things I can perhaps tell you about if you stop just there. It will have probably some sharper corners somewhere. If I can, everyone is different, and sometimes it takes a little while to find it. There's one here, and there's one here. So there's a point here and a point there. I don't know with your hand whether you can hold this little corner. This is the corner I'm holding. It's that little one. And on the other side, that little one. And I don't know if you can do something like this with your hands. Push backwards. That's it. And now, can you turn around slowly? That's it. So it's like a little parachute on the back. It's a little space in there. And it suggests a kind of there is an emptiness inside this garment that is bigger than Anne, and also bigger than Katie, who it's made for. There's some hollow space within there. But also it suggests a shape that is quite angular, something like a square or a rectangle, by the fact that it's got 2 points on it. Something else about this that might be said is perhaps it has some things that might potentially resemble pockets somewhere. Let's have a look if I can find one. There's one on this side. You might think, oh, that's a very useful pocket for putting, say, a wallet or a phone in. I wouldn't do that because it comes out of it. So it's like it's like a space that goes all the way through, and so it's actually only useful for an umbrella or a sword. So it's quite useful if you want to put your sword somewhere. It goes through that pocket, but not very good if you wanted to put something valuable, unless you close the end of it off. Now this seems like a hole I just put my hand through, but actually it's a loop. When you've got something flat that then joins back onto itself, it creates a loop. And that loop is like almost a little valley that you can pass through. And I'll come back to it, explaining where it is at the end. But also, by putting my hand through it, there's one here, and there's one, I think, a bit lower down here. So there's two on this garment, and both of them happen to be on the back. If I were to put your arm backwards through the lower of those two holes, then potentially, well, that's a little bit tight on you, if this spin around, it could become a sleeve. It could become incorporated back into the garment. That could potentially be quite interesting. So sometimes I will fix the shoulder and it becomes a built-in sleeve. That's one on that side. Perhaps I might go to put this one through on this side. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. These aren't designed to be sleeves, but they have the potential to be used as sleeves. So maybe this one goes backwards through this little valley, and it makes a different kind of sleeve. See, I rather like this little.
That's divine. Yeah.
So there's possibilities of change. This isn't a garment that's static. It's got the ability to change it around, to do things with it. And some of that is the strangeness of its construction and the fact it's got holes that you can move through. But these aren't holes, these are loops, and there's a difference between loops and holes. As you can see, you're actually putting your hand through what I'd call a valley. Between two mountains there's a valley, and I'll show that to you later when we actually take this apart. So that's now thrown onto the back. Give me one last spin around, and then I will begin to deconstruct it. So I think I'll take one hole apart. If you step back to one down. Here, there is a seam that's curving. And that I know is a hole because I cut and constructed this. I know that this garment is actually made from 6 holes. And you'll be seeing those 6 holes later because I'll lay them out here and I'll step inside them. But this hole here is a hole that you're not actually passing through. Your body's, Anna's body's not passing through it. If you turn now and face the audience again, there's another curved seam here on the front. And it starts on the front. If you follow the seam, it's on the front. If you continue looking at it, it goes onto the side, and then if I put my hand through, which comes out over here, it's actually going onto the back. So what's actually happening is there's a seam here that your body is stepping through. So you're actually standing inside a hole, just you don't realise it at the moment. You're actually standing inside a pair of holes, in fact, and we'll see them when I cut them apart. So turn back facing that way is good, I think. Yeah, that's great. And I'm going to cut this one apart first, just so we can understand what these holes are like. It's actually 2 holes that are connected together. And in fact, maybe I can explain it a little bit like this. The dimension around those holes are as big as Katie's waist when it was made for her. Not waist, her hips. I'd measure her hip measurement, not a tight measurement, but an easy measurement. And she was able to fit through that. And Anna too is able to fit through that quite nicely. Now, if you were to take a rectangle, like I've got here, and fold it in half, this hole here is actually 100 centimetres big, just to keep it a nice round number, and it's being removed. There were 2 holes, and the 2 holes have been joined together. It's been folded over, and they've been sewn together with a 1 centimetre seam allowance. And what, step on here, so you can actually see what's happening. So you're going to just be having a class where you're facing the wall, and that won't be very nice. If I step through this hole, and if you then move, say, this way, you see a seam here like that. That's what you're seeing here. You're seeing a seam from the outside, but actually what's happening on the inside is you're stepping through a pair of holes. When people make these garments, they put them on, and they've cut all the holes out, and they've connected them together. They often think, where's the holes gone? And it's because they're in the holes. Yeah? And when you're in the hole, you can't see it. So, especially when it's a fabric that is opaque, you can't see through opaque fabric. If you make it in transparent fabric, then you get to see the inner workings very nicely. This little bit here, this is what I call the valley, the V. And that's what I was actually putting my hand through a moment ago. Or rather, Anna was putting her hand through it. And because it was big enough to put your hand through between 2 holes. If you now turn back and face towards this way, I'll cut this one apart, and we'll actually begin to see what it looks like, and I'll show you where that valley is. Eventually, this garment will be put back together again, because I like to take them apart and then remend them. And they then have a sort of like a second life. Because when you rip them, they create a tear, and then it's nice to hand stitch and mend them again. And that actually is a rather beautiful form of visible mending that I rather enjoy. So this hole here, this circle, was big enough for originally Katie and now Anna to step through. But in this instance, Anna isn't stepping through this particular hole. It is possible to do so, but I think it wouldn't be so comfortable on the body. So sometimes I choose for the holes to be stepped through and sometimes not. So this hole has a relationship with this hole over here that I just cut it apart from. They're equal in size and they fit it together like that. I've now just cut it apart. You can begin to see, as you see inside it, that there's sort of seams on the back here that are rather interesting. We'll have a look at them next, I think. If you now face the audience, I'm going to now cut apart, I'll do this one last, but I'm going to cut apart the side seam because that allows you to look in, like X-ray vision, and see what's inside the garment. So the side seams, like this top I've got here, the side seam starts underneath the arm, but it ends at the hem. These side seams don't end up at the bottom, they instead start under the arm, they continue, and this particular one ends here. So it's not hitting the hem, it's actually going down and just ending. And I'll try and explain how that works in a moment. It's got a long one on that side, and on this side it's got a short one that starts here and continues to just this point. So they're different lengths, they're not the same length side seam. I'll open the long one first, so I don't know if you can put your arm up, I won't cut you, I promise. Now inside the garment, and this side seam is like a loop that loops around here, so it's a looping side seam. And you can begin to also see that Anna is stepping inside a hole. Her body's passing through one which continues to this bit at the front here. So I just maybe if you give a little, or maybe we do it like this, you can begin to see inside this a bit. So I'm just going to do this very slowly round, because it looks quite interesting on video later as well. We'll speed it up backwards. Is how this video is going to be made. It still looks a very complex shape currently. And it looks complex because fabric is soft, it collapses. It's not like, say, paper or cardboard, which is rigid. It's easier for our brains to understand. When something is soft, we suddenly think, well, that's complex. Actually, it's not that complicated. When we see it flat, it's very, very simple. But our brains get a little bit confused by anything that twists and which forms in its own kind of coiling way. So I'll let go of that one and I'll open the other seam. So you face towards me now. And I'll open this one on this side. So both the side seams are open. This is a shorter side seam. Not quite so long, but it starts under the arm and it loops back around again. It comes back from back to front. So you can now see this is a bit actually wanted to spin around too. So you see this strange shape that's now forming around the body with lots of holes in it. So next up, I'm going to take apart this seam here, and that's the one that Anna is stepping through. So it's both the seams on the front and on the back, because there's a hole and she's standing in that hole. So I'll release it so the two holes come apart from each other, and one of them will drop lower. Hopefully it will drop low enough for you to be able to step out the side of one of them. One of the holes is dropped quite low. You're able to step outside that. And it is perfect, right. So now, this hole here that I just removed from you, a moment ago, you were stepping through and was there. It's now over here. And now this garment is beginning to really sort of come off the body in quite an unusual way. Just going to maybe step like that for a moment. And then I'll just move around to see what the other side looks like. Had I fallen off the stage then, you would have come with me. Because I was quite an unusual shape. So the next thing to do is I'm going to now cut the shoulders, and that will allow it to drop off the body, and it will allow Anna to also now step out of the garment. She will then be on the outside of it, and she can help me hold it, and you'll be my assistant suddenly, which will we switch and roll. Now if I ask you to hold, a moment ago when you had your hands behind your back, you were pushing outwards, holding two corners, and these are the two corners you were holding. I wonder actually if you can swap sides. If you go where I am, and I'll come this way. That's it. So if you just go back against the wall a tiny bit, perfect. So now, you can see that this is made from two materials. One is a thick stripe, and one of them is, turn it this way up, a much thinner stripe. And it's got holes in it. Some of those holes are circular, but some of them are also more strangely shaped, and they're collapsing here, and it's slightly hard to see them because they're kind of like getting gravity as we hold it up this way. Doesn't allow us to see exactly what shape they are, but when I put it flat on the floor, we'll be able to look at it from above, and it'll be able to hold it out in a way that you'll see the full geometry. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually cut apart two of these seams so it becomes two-dimensional. And I think I'll start with this one here. Two ends that I would put down there will be long. So now it's become two-dimensional. Okay, now what we're going to do next is we're going to walk down, maybe we'll go down those stairs, and I'll just put it on the floor here so we can see it completely flat. Person or sometimes around a mannequin, but usually around a person. And sometimes I might lay down a garment such as the one I'm wearing, just draw around that as a nice starting point. If you've got a garment you already like the feel of, then maybe that's a good starting point just for the top bit, the shoulder bit, the fit around the neck and the armholes. And maybe, in this example, it doesn't have any sleeves. And the reason for that is this is a demonstration model. It was made for a class. And the purpose of it really is just so that I can very quickly put it on the body to show it. And to do that, I want to have no sleeves because it's easy to get on over the head. But if I was making this, you know, for particular people who are fun at doing something quite different, 2 and 3. And then these ones were done last. They're the ones I cut past first, 4 and 5. But I call this pattern now, because now it's a flat pattern, it's a 6-hole, not 5, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I call it a 6-hole Katie Anna tunnel dress. And it's got Katie's name here actually, and so I'm just add Anna's name to it, because it's an accumulative effect. It's now the Katie Anna flat pattern. But there's 6 holes, not 5. Does anyone know where the 6th hole is? The tunnel. The tunnel itself. The tunnel, when this is wrapped around into a tube, so for example, here's a tube that's much smaller. It's just a rectangle that's been folded in half. This rectangle was 70 centimetres wide, been folded in half, so now it's 35 centimetres wide. And it's just got a hole in it. And that hole is the same at this end as it is down this end, because this one hasn't been closed off, not like a doona, like this is a bit like a doona or a duvet, or a pillowcase, where we closed off one end. But this one's been left open both ends. And it's just been folded in half, but that's the first hole. Just by sewing this long seam together down this edge, it creates a hole. And that was the hem. That's how you got into it. If you didn't have a hole, you wouldn't be a garment, because you wouldn't be able to be in it. So all garments have holes in it, really, at least one hole, that hem at the bottom, and then they maybe have another hole for a neck or an armhole. They're actually included in this, the design of that hole that's done first. So this is just an idea of how we can connect holes to create unusual geometry around the body. And I want to just take this story a little bit further before we have a break. I know we're going to have a break fairly shortly. I just want to show you how what's next is these pairs of holes create valleys. A folds over to A, B folds over to B, C folds over to C. It's a bit like folding a fan. It goes front, back, front, back, front, back. A bit like if I was going to do it for this. I might say that, that. It causes a little concertina, and between each one I'd create pairs of holes. Here and here. We're going to try this out in a moment and see what it makes. But when you cut these holes out and they begin to sew together, they sew together like this. This hole here goes over the top of that hole and we join them. We sew them. But in paper, it would rip or tear. But in fabric, we can manipulate it and get in there and sew it quite easily, even when it's miniature size like this. So when these holes join and they are sewn, the body is going to go up through the hem, through the first step, through the second step, through the third step, and out to the top. And you won't see the body unless, like when Anna was wearing it, I begin to cut it apart. In fabric, it will collapse, whereas paper doesn't. If you were to see through it, like when I release the side seam, you'd see that my arm is passing through it. It's the same for if you're making a sleeve, a trouser leg, a collar, a body, whether it's a top or a dress that's longer. All of them are just simple tubes that the body's passing through, and the holes are just easy big enough to get through. This was a straight one, because it was folded in a straight line. A bit like I might take a tube such as this, back in the front. If I was going to fold up this little tube, this little mini dress, I might fold in straight lines by going one to the front, one to the back, one to the front, one to the back. It creates a little concertina like this. And between each fold, I put pairs of holes. But this is when you're folding in a straight line. When you suddenly, like this one, start to fold at strange angles, unusual things begin to occur. So here's another version. This one's made from two materials. It's a little mini dress with a front and a little mini dress with a back. One's in a stripy fabric and one's in a plain. Maybe one is a jersey and one is a woven. One is transparent, one is opaque. If you put different materials together, you'll get different end results. When you make this into a tube by closing the shoulders, close the side seam, so it's a long tube. Remember, the first hole is up through the hem. This time it's folding not in straight lines, but at angles. So it's not an angle of 45 degrees or 72 or 28, it's an angle of whatever you like. Everyone will do it differently. So I fold A to A at an angle. Then I turn it over, B to B at an angle. Turn it over, C to C at an angle. Now when you do it at angles, something kind of odd happens, because it's a bit like, say, this one was folded in a straight line, by just going backwards and forwards on itself. Everything is kept straight by just doing that. But I could also do it at an angle instead. I could do it so it's like, now I'm doing an angle, and then an angle this way, and an angle that way. It creates a more unusual shape. But also, when you start doing angles, it starts to rotate it slightly around and around and around. It's beginning to go around the body. So when something like that happens in pattern cutting terms, it means that when this is all sewn together, the back, which is plain, ends up on the front, which is stripy. So that's why when this garment was worn, some of the fine stripe ended up on the front, even though it started off on the back. So the back has been brought around the front. That's just because with a hole, you can rotate inside a hole quite easily. Your body passes through here, through all the different holes, up to the top. And because of the fact it's made in a woven fabric, which stretches on certain grain lines, you're going to get a very unpredictable effect as this cascades around the body. But as you can see with my hand through it, you can also imagine what it would be like if it was a sleeve instead. Or if I put it on my leg, what might it be like if it was a trouser leg? We can transfer things from body to arm to head to leg quite easily. What happens with this one is that the left side seam zigzags and ends up on the right. So what left is right, right is left, back is front. It's very, very good. If you're dyspraxic, the fact that all of those things are actually equivalent is very, very comforting. But to anyone you're teaching it to, it's confusing as hell. But this is just how I see the world. The world, it's a bit like if you keep travelling north, keep going, 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 you end up in the south. Because we live on a three-dimensional object. You know, we're not on a flat map. You know, the more south you go, you will eventually keep going, you'll end up in the north. If you go west, keep going west, keep going west, keep going west, you end up in east. You know, it's the world, isn't it? That's globalization. That is the fact that the problems that start in one place are half of the problems somewhere else. So people need not forget that. It's the same with the human body. We don't have side seams, we don't have front, we don't have back. If you continue towards the left, you will end up on the right eventually. The front and the back are actually part of the same thing. This pattern is just very, very simple though. Like a person standing upright, or you can float above it like a bird and see that your body's travelling through these holes in exactly the same way that it is there. So with the Timo trouser, all the bits that were moved rather than making the pattern of the lining, I make it a little bit shorter than. Sometimes it might come to about here, the lining. And so I would be shortening it from its finished length. And because it's being set back a bit, it's pulling some of the outside up onto the inside. And it can either join onto here by having this pleated or gathered to join it, or I would maybe measure this. And maybe if I measure it, it's maybe 200 centimeters. It's less than the bigger tooth. And that would mean I'd cut one circle that's 200 centimeters. And then I'd cut another one around it that is, say, 300 centimeters. So the outer edge of this will join onto this, and then the inner one will join onto here. And it makes a little sort of skirt like this, where that is that. It means that when you look up inside it, you've got a perfect circle. And so maybe I'd use a contrasting material. So if I was if I was lining that dress, I could use maybe fluorescent yellow or something completely different. Only you would know it's there, unless sometimes when you're walking, you might just see a little tiny catch of
flashes of fluorescent yellow. How awesome!
And it's somewhere. I'm just looping these together. Cut through one layer only. This is sort of like a dress of this nature. But I'm going to show you how you could also make something onto a single layer instead. And of course a pyramid dress. So I've got a back and a front pattern, my starting point. And I'm just going to put it's my centre front line, just coming through here. This is my centre back line, through there. Now what we have been doing is we've been laying these kind of like opposite each other, and then we'd loop the side seams together. Now this time, I'm going to cut through my centre front.
I'm worried about the scissors if they're not paper scissors.
I usually deliberately use fabric scissors to cut paper because I don't want them to be razor sharp. For the fact that when I'm cutting, because I'm only cutting singular layer, even though a pillowcase is 2 layers, and so I like to have my hand behind the blade, and for that reason I don't want them to be razor sharp. I like them to be a little bit dull, and it's enough to cut fabric but not enough to cut me. So that's why I always cut paper and fabric with the same scissors. And I often sharpen them to get them back to razor sharp, but then as soon as they're razor sharp, I then will cut paper to try and dull it just a little bit. Now this time, instead of looping just the side seams alone, I'm going to put this on an angle that way and this on an angle that way.
What the?
Okay. And I'll just trace it through. So this is my back, my centre back.
better than hand sewing circles.
So that is centre front, centre front. Right now, what we've been doing is we've been looping our side seams. So we've been looping these two and looping these two. But in this example, I'm also going to loop my centre back and my centre front. And that creates immediately a hole. It's a strange shape, almost like a flower-like hole, that once cut around, the garment's going to rise up this way. If I was to put a big circle around it, then this is the hem. A bit like a circular skirt. Only one layer, not two layers, just a singular layer, and the garment would rise upwards, and it's called a pyramid dress. It's going yeah, well, this is the thing with the width, is that in terms of length, the garment's going to be as long as all the way around this. It's going to be fairly symmetrical, but in order to create this, because it would be very wide, you'd have to probably piece maybe 3 widths of material together.
Maybe get a children's dress out.
Yeah, you can do a small top perhaps, but as soon as its length comes inwards, then it becomes more top-like, and then perhaps you could fit it just about onto a very, very wide fabric. Otherwise, first of all, I would make some fabric that is, say, like this. So that's one fabric, and then this one's another fabric, perhaps.
And would you use different
Perhaps.
could you actually get as much as you can out of your fabric and then do layers?
I'd probably avoid layers with this because it would get complicated. Single is possibly better.
And too heavy?
It could get heavy.
Yeah.
But this is the same technique. It's the hem. It's a single layer thing instead. I could show you a version of this that is hellish complicated. So we start in exactly the same way with centre back and centre front like this. Okay. But this time, instead of keeping them on exact 90-degree angles to each other, where everything's symmetrical, this time we're going to just simply put that there, this there, and that there. Okay? Yeah. Let's see what happens.
Hey Julian, could everyone just step back a little bit and make the circle bigger? Because not everyone.
So we're giving you a hot flash, Julian.
If you could just make a bigger circle, I think more people can see.
So on this one, we've got centre front over here. We've got centre front over here.
I think we need to step back a little bit.
So we've got centre back, centre front, but everything's kind of gone onto strange angles now. Now, if you wanted to, you could just make similar loops, and that would be, it'd make a very odd effect. But I'm gonna, instead of just doing simple loops, say on the sides, let's join the side seams first, because that's what we started joining. This time I'm just gonna do it with a more curvy line. And I'm going to do it also in the centre back and also in the centre front. Okay? Now, instead of putting that onto a big circle, you could if you wanted to put it on a circle, but maybe we put it onto something that actually mirrors this sort of line.
Or if you kept it on a rectangle because you've got such a regularity.
Now this is the hem. Now you can't imagine what this makes because the brain can't figure that out. It's too complicated. So you can't imagine how the material will perform and twist and pull against itself. But that is the same concept as the first one, wherever the first one went. Where's the first one gone?
I just took it on the
It's
table
there,
behind
over
so
there.
you weren't
It's
drawing
just the same, but it's just at odd angles, and instead we're using freehand lines. And so the length of this garment is, well, at this point it's that long. At this point it's a bit longer. This one is getting a bit short here. This one is, yeah, they're variable lengths, so the hem is going to be up and down all the time. But also this pulling backwards and forwards is going to create twists.
So where would
It's
this
a totally
stitch?
unpredictable thing.
Where would this stitch? Can you just point that out?
Well, just, if you see this, could you imagine how you might stitch that?
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah, shoulder seams first.
Yeah, you'd probably
Or not.
join your shoulders together.
Yep.
Well, you do exactly the same. It's the same thing. It's just that it's got wobbly lines. So I join my centre back and centre front shoulders together. I join my centre back and centre front shoulders together. And then in order to sew off the side seam, so here's a side seam, they would join and it would be sewn off to nothing. It would be the same with this. There's always a middle point, but it's got a weird voluminous bit. Really, the only way to try it is to make one. So then you sort of figure out, I don't know what this would look like myself. I can't picture it. All I know is that the geometry is correct, that I know I can join those shoulders, I know I can join them together, I know I can join the centre front together. It's just that it's going to be wobbling and twisting and pulling all the way around the garment, and it might be a good thing. It might be, yeah, that's an amazing design.
Have you ever tried
Or it might be a
either of
disaster.
these?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously I've tried versions of, but every time I draw it, it's a different thing.
Excuse me, Julian.
Yeah.
You'd start with the shoulder seams. Would you then go with the side seams or the centre front and centre back?
Because, like in this one, these are equal pretty much.
Yeah.
So these ones are unequal. So whether you do your centre front first or your side seam, it doesn't really matter, the order of it. I'd probably do shoulders first, centre front, centre back, and then I join my side seams last.
And in terms of them being unequal, would you ever try to just sew until
please
you
as
get
well.
to the middle? Or
You
do
would
try to
always
change?
find the middle, because the distance between here, there's always going to be a halfway point.
Yeah, okay. It doesn't matter that it's not at the rise
No.
of the curve. or
You could also, of course, add pleats and gathers
Yeah.
into this, and then that would have a different effect. I know it's a hard thing to look at. What on earth is it? All I'm only showing it to you as an extreme example of something that is relatively simple for this to rise upwards into a garment. This one, our brain can't figure it out. And it's just because of the way we learn geometry. We learn about how to make things as solids, and we learn how to fit a square peg into a square hole. We learn at such an early age that we think that's what geometry is. It's a very rigid thinking approach. This we can maybe begin to imagine, and that's quite a feat to even imagine something like this, especially something flexible and soft. But this is just beyond the way that the brain can really sort of understand it. But that's all right. Maybe you don't need to be able to picture the end result. You can just simply go through the process of making, and you'll find the end result eventually.
Julian, would you start with a minimum of, you know, when you're talking about joining fabrics in that first example, a minimum of like 300 centimetres as your...
What is the entire
Yeah.
width of the thing?
Yeah, so if this was...
I think what I'd probably do first is actually on paper, I would design the whole shape. So get that bit in a proportion you know works, and then I'd work out, well, how long do I want it to be? And once you know how long it to be, you can then figure out how wide because it's a circle, it's going to be in the middle of a circle. You know how wide your fabric needs to be. That way you can start to piece together your fabric accordingly. Design the whole shape first, just by taking, as I did, my backs and fronts, just rotating one at 90 degrees. Sorry I had to show that to you, just as a thing to say.
I just,
Sometimes things are really weirdly, you cannot imagine what they may become, and that's what's important to me, is that I don't know what the result is. So the design comes last. You discover it at the very end of the process.
Julian, I'd be very curious to see that one if you left it on the rectangle fabric.
Yeah,
And
instead of having this outer edge.
Yeah, because you've got such unevenness.
Yeah.
I
I really
You
only
still end up with a handkerchief. You know,
Yeah,
you still
yeah.
end up with
Yeah.
Well, you think you would, but it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see whether you in fact do.
That'd be interesting to see.
And you could enhance that bottom edge.
cut a hole big enough for your head to get through, a hole for your arm to get through, and a hole for your arm to get through. And
That's what I did with this dress.
it's nice and simple. It doesn't even use patterns. It just uses holes for heads and arms. And this is cut through one layer only. So you're going to come out it this way. There's a reverse side to this, of course.
So how
Stripy
big
side.
does your tube have to be for that then?
I would just use the
width
width of the cloth. What's the width of the cloth? I'd use that. And its length. If this is the length of the person, I'd always go double if I'm adding in pairs of circles. If you were doing this with no pairs of circles, then it could just be as long as how long do you want the garment to finish being.
So if you're adding a sleeve, you're always adding a sleeve afterwards, after you put the bodice together.
Potentially, if you could add a sleeve onto here, like a little tubular sleeve. But you could also be, sometimes you can use grown-on sleeves. For example, if I had a Duna shape, this time I will use a kimono block. So we just loop from underneath the arms. So this has got grown-in sleeves within it. It's got a seam on the shoulder on both sides. If you wanted to, you could get rid potentially of one of them. Get rid of one seam. Could be. It could be a hole like that. So it's just got a seam on one side. These two are just grown together. There's no. There would potentially be a seam in there, but we don't necessarily always need to have seams in the shoulders. It's something useful to have if you're going to have a bit of fastening or something.
So where's the shoulder in that one?
This is the shoulder here, and then this is the shoulder and that shoulder. I've just taken this and I've joined just one side of them together. So, say for example, that was this neck, and then I'm just joining this on the neck here.
Or you could just join both shoulders and put an opening.
And then I
front
get
or
rid of
back.
that seam, and then I'm joining that to that. So this is all on top of itself.
Oh, and the hard work. Oh, that would turn out well.
I think for a musician, I thought I'd maybe use something to do with the way that he plays an instrument or the way he holds an instrument. So I draw around his body according to how he sits at the piano and how big his octave reach is, and they become the measurements I use to develop a dress around this person. I'll show you the process because I've got it sort of like in stages, and you can see how a very different shaped hole, like a very odd and very complex shaped hole, can sometimes be used in a very experimental way.
Can you leave?
So you've got a button here and a button here, and one on either side. And one on either side.